I think it's important to separate the Canada Pension Plan from the Canada Pension Investment Board. They're two distinct bodies legally. And the Canada Pension Investment Board, I'm simply going to call the fund. Okay, just so I'm not repeating acronyms or anything. I'll just call it the fund. Now, that money from the Canada Pension Plan, some of it now, since the late 1990s, goes into the Canada Pension Investment Board. In other words, Canada made a decision that they would supplement the money they needed to cover our pensions by the profits made on commercial or private investment in the market. Let's say, just say market investment. Now, I said that revenue from the fund, from their investments, would go back to the pension plan to cover its costs because of our demographics. Our ages are going up. There's more of us who are older. That would start in 2023. I had a conversation just yesterday with Pedro here, and Pedro was indicating, and he quite rightly pointed out, that the Canada Pension Plan and the fund are now advertising the fact that some of your pension comes from the investments. This is true. I think there's an increasing scale in which the money that you put into the pension from your paychecks, and that later you receive as part of your pension, is right now coming from profits accrued by the Canadian Pension Investment Board. That is the fund. It's all very complicated. But the key here, the absolute key here, is that the money that's paying my pension, your pensions, if you're going to get, if you have it, or that will get it, even more so when you do get it, will be paid by the profits from the investments made by the fund. The fund, the Canada Pension Investment Board, has itself, that board is made up of a number of very, very experienced market investors. They can be from banks, they can be from private investment funds, and so on. Their duty, they see their duty as a fiduciary duty. That is, to make a profit or to use the profits from their investments for the pension fund, and to do that in their terms. One of the ethical criteria is simply not the level of profit, but a stable and sustainable level of profit. You can go to the website and look at this. Now, they're not concerned about the actual, I shouldn't say they're not concerned. It's a very secondary concern in terms of what they're going to invest in. It's a kind of neutral, some might say amoral way of considering what they're going to invest in. Now, all I did, and this research is just beginning, and I did it on my own, and the resources are very limited. There's a lot more work to do on it. But I want to point out that the fund, the Canada Pension Investment Board, has so far invested, up to this point this year, $278 billion of your taxpayers' money around the world. It's among the top 10 national investment boards in the world. There are others. You could take, for example, here in Alberta, the Heritage Fund, for example, was structured somewhat similarly. The amounts of money are huge. Of that amount, $278 billion, just a tiny slice of it, tiny in their terms, not ours, of about $450 million is invested in Israel. Okay? So, and that's only in public companies. We don't know how much the pension fund has invested privately, that is, in companies that are not publicly selling shares on the market. There are private companies, which in fact are kind of another layer of investment company, which also, but you can't get at it unless you're actually one of the investors yourself. It's very hard to get at. It would take a considerable more research. So what I'm going through here is your pension money being invested in Israel, and it's very small in their terms, but very symbolic and very important, I think, from the perspective of Canadian citizens, and particularly of Quakers. And I've looked at an even narrower band there, and that's the investment in defense-related industries. This is not just the trade agreement that Linda's described, which those figures are huge. These figures are somewhat smaller, but symbolically more important in some ways. We have, how shall I say it? This is a long-term engagement and linkage with Israel. It's not a simple trade agreement. We're saying Canada Pension Fund, we're investing in these Israeli industries for the long term. Mind you, they can pull them anytime they like. So that's the question we have to ask ourselves. Before I go any further, there's only 2 countries in the world which are acknowledged at the UN level to be occupying another country, an adjacent region or country, and doing so, as I've stated there, as a belligerent occupier which denies the subjugated population the fundamental right to national self-determination. So that's one justification for singling out Israel. There are others, but that seems to be the one. One of the first companies I looked at was Israel Chemical Limited. That pension fund has invested, they hold a simple 1,480 shares worth about $8 million. Not a lot of money in the fund's terms, but still there. It's quite important because Israel Chemicals Limited, I'll try and shorten this, is a company which, among other things, provides a lot of the chemicals and a lot of the infrastructure for the chemical inputs for the Israeli military. It's not easily observable on their website. It's not easy to get at. But then you begin to look at the structure of Israel Chemical Limited, and you realize that it is, on the board, are a whole range of retired military officers from Israel, Israeli military officers, including, as I've noted there, a former member of the Knesset, which is Israel's parliament, basically, who was also the deputy defense minister. And most critically, the largest arms exporter in Israel is the Israel Corporation. That's all they call it. I'm sorry, the Israel Military Industries. The board chair, past board chair of Israel Military Industries is on the Israel Chemical Limited board. Now, the key here is not to kind of name names, but it's to realize how tightly integrated the networks are in Israel. And what Linda has pointed out is how the degree to which that pattern of investments and trade in weapons is pulling in and is deliberately, as a matter of policy, pulling in the Canadian side. That is the Canadian government, basically, and Canadian enterprises. Canada, for example, has 7,000 shares in Israel Corporation. They're only worth about $1 million. But that company owns 37% of Bazan Corporation. Bazan Corporation produces the fuel that fueled the Israeli jets that bombed Gaza. You see what's happening here? We make an investment in a corporation. That corporation has another leadership role, a majority share or a significant minority share in fueling the Israeli bombing of Gaza. It's just that simple. In other words, fuel becomes a weapon. Something to think about. Another small example company I've called, that's named Stratasys. 121,000 shares worth about $4 million. It's an Israeli company that does lots of good stuff. It's a printing company, but it's a 3D printing company. They print medical instruments, they print all sorts of interesting stuff. But they also have been in the production, 3D printing of drones. They're into it. They're printing the drones, yeah. The Canada Pension Investment Board also has other investments that are very hard to trace because it's through banks. Some of it's in real estate, and it's fairly innocuous. It's fairly straightforward. Some of it's I ran across one called Mellanox Technologies, and they made a point of stating that they do hire Palestinians, but they also noted quite explicitly the Mellanox Technologies, the only way they can get to work with their Palestinian employees is online. They can't go face to face with them. So we see, and my only conclusion, and I think I'm restating what I've already stated, we see a cluster of investments in an interrelated industrial, high-tech, militarized society, causing us to ask whether Canadian people's money should be there at all. So what Linda's described as the trade relationship by and large, those kinds of linkages, plus the security linkages, direct between Canada, policemen from Canada, into surveillance techniques in Israel, back and forth. This is very narrow and very specific on the investments, and it's only a portion of it. Of the $450 million that I stated, that is only a portion of the Canadian investment in Israel. That's what we publicly know about.